Right, Melissa, thank you. Now to our continuing coverage of the Menendez case. While the parole hearings have been going on, the LA County District Attorney's Office has been preparing for another legal fight with Lyle and Erik in court. The brothers have asked for a new trial based on their claims of new evidence being discovered. Our investigative reporter Erik Leonard spoke with the DA this afternoon about that part of the case and yesterday's parole denial for Erik.
Hi, Colleen. Well, since he took office late last year, LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman has opposed any relief for the Menendez brothers. The DA has said repeatedly the life sentences they received for the murders of their parents were appropriate. And now that parole has been denied for Erik, the DA says he suspects the brothers will continue to push their other path to potential release in court, a long-shot habeas corpus petition that Hochman also opposes.
Had the Menendez brothers gone through this parole process, ended up with parole, and been released, would they have continued with the habeas motion? Who knows? Probably unlikely. They still might have done it anyway to get a new trial. But I would think that they got their goal, which is to get out of prison. They might not want to have a judge go through the whole analysis to reaffirm that they committed a brutal act of murder against their parents.
Hochman's office filed this month its response to that habeas petition, which is a request from the brothers for a new trial. The DA's office says in its response, what the brothers' defense lawyers have described as new evidence isn't that new, and it can't be verified, so it should be excluded, and therefore there shouldn't be a consideration of a new trial. Now, Hochman says he can't address the parole hearing for Lyle Menendez, but as to Erik, many of the arguments against parole made by the DA's office in its legal filings and even during the hearing yesterday appeared to be adopted by the Parole Commission that denied parole. Some of those issues having to do with the true nature of the motive for the murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez, and some having to do with the seriousness of Erik Menendez's violations of prison rules.
The parole board focused on those violations as well to show that if you can't abide by the rules inside prison, then we don't have trust that you can abide by them outside of prison. So I think that's why the parole board ultimately concluded that in that case, Erik Menendez was not ready for parole, which dovetails with our analysis.
As to the habeas petition for the new trial, it's now up to a judge in downtown L.A. to consider the next steps. There could be a decision made just based on the court papers that have been filed. There could be a hearing on the underlying legal issues, or there could be a hearing on the brothers' specific claims that new evidence would have changed the outcome of their case that led to their convictions. Back to you in the studio.
All right, so Erik, thank you. Joining us once again as our legal analyst, Royal Oaks. We appreciate you being here. But before we get things started, we have to remind our viewers that we're still being restricted by the parole board from sharing any information about what is going on inside at a hearing, but that is common practice in parole hearings.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about anything that happened yesterday with Erik's denial that will either help or hurt Lyle today.
Well, the fact that different commissioners decided Erik's fate is probably good for Lyle because, as you know, they really slammed Erik, and perhaps these commissioners will go a little easier on him, and maybe because the offenses during imprisonment are less serious by Lyle, that's a glimmer of hope for him. Because you remember, we learned about Erik, he's helping gang members with tax fraud. He's taking heroin and alcohol. You look at Lyle's offenses, well, he had a cigarette lighter and he got some Adidas shoes and that was contraband, and he blew off an orientation meeting. So that is something in his favor.
This parole hearing, they said yesterday that they're not re-litigating. They're not here to retry what happened in court. The brothers were convicted of that. This is all about their behavior while they're in prison, correct?
It is, except to this extent, Colleen. When you look at the horrific nature of the crime and you look at the psychological evaluations by the shrinks, I think they took into account not only the fact that there were violations of prison rules, but also the fundamental nature of the crime. And they focused yesterday with Erik on the fact that they not only killed the dad, the alleged abuser, but the mom. And they had shifting stories. Well, she was suicidal, so we killed her. Or, I was devastated by her enabling this, and so I killed her. Or, she couldn't have lived without Dad. And it didn't make sense, and it didn't have much credibility. So the commissioners didn't like that. So they really do take the original crime as well as what they've done in prison into account.
Yeah, one of the other tracks is in their bid to get it out is that new trial based on this new evidence here. Are they aggressively going down this track? Or at least
absolutely.
Seeking it out?
Yeah, and Erik's report there was terrific. And here's the key. This new evidence mainly is Erik Menendez's letter to his cousin 9 months before the murders saying Dad is a molester. Now, that's new, and that's stronger than what was presented at trial. Because at trial, what you heard was the men saying, we were molested, uncorroborated, and you look at him and you say, well, of course you're going to say that. You don't want to go to prison. But he said this 9 months before the murders. So that's an argument by Mark Garagos to say to the judge, Your Honor, if the original jury had heard this new evidence, they might have come to a different conclusion, in which case I deserve a brand new trial.
Royal, let's talk about this moderate risk that we heard several times yesterday in this risk assessment. Can you break that down a little bit? I mean, if you hear the offenses, you think, wow, there's a cell phone, it's not that bad. But is that all about sort of flaunting what you can do while you're in prison, not following orders?
That's the essence of it, but it's backed up by the fact that you have psychologists examining the men multiple times, writing up conclusions and coming to their expert opinions, and it's an official deal. Either you have a high risk, moderate, or low, and if you've got a moderate risk of committing a violent act after you get out of prison, only 1 out of 5 times historically does somebody get parole. And of course, that's the problem here. Certainly Governor Newsom doesn't want to get involved now, because now that Erik has gotten the bad news, does anybody think Newsom's going to say, well, I don't care what the parole board said, I want Erik to be freed? Yeah, Erik goes out, commits a terrible crime, boom, there goes Newsom's reputation and his presidential ambitions.
All right, stay with us. More to come.
You bet.
Thanks, Royal.